Hey everybody, this is Dream, and before I get started, if you don't mind, hit that subscribe button and the like button on this video. That would be really awesome. I really do appreciate all you guys. Make sure to check out the links in the description for Discord and for Patreon. If you're interested in either, find the links there below. Discord is growing pretty quick, so I really like how that's going, and we talk a lot about fantasy and lineup discussions, all kind of stuff. And so feel free to join that if you would like to. With that said, let's get into this pretty good slate. This is a big slate, and we have a lot of good options from stacking potential. Some of the teams I think are stackable are San Diego, Colorado, who are playing each other in Colorado. It has 11.5 run total game there. San Francisco looks like a stackable team. Texas has some upside. A three-player stack from the Angels might work out okay. And then the right-handed hitters for Houston, the Yankees, and the Rockies look good, as well as the Chicago White Sox. So there's a lot of good options on the slate. We got a lot of bad pitchers, and we have a lot of good pitchers. And so with that said, let's go and get into the pitchers here. So the top guy is going to be Shohei Ohtani. Now he has, in the 8 of the last 10 games, he's had over 20 fantasy points. And he's only had 2 bad games in that span. But he has 35-point upside in this matchup because of his strikeout potential and stuff like that. The only downside that he really has is he doesn't get the wins very much because his team is not very good. But I actually think that he has a pretty good opportunity in this particular matchup to get the win. Then we're going to take a look at Garrett Cole, who is playing Boston. Not the most ideal matchup for him. But he is averaging 20 fantasy points a game against them. And he hasn't really been all that great lately, but he's been pretty good most of the season. The next game I'm going to talk about is Carlos Rodon. He's playing against Arizona, and he's been pitching extremely well as of late, but this temperature in this game does not make this ideal. Plus, Arizona is in hitter ballpark. But in 4 games against Arizona this season, he's had 30, 19, 13, and 3 fantasy points. Then I'm going to talk about Chris Bassett for the Mets playing against Oakland. He's in a pretty good spot here. He has 35-point upside, but he has also been a little bit of a downside. He hasn't been perfect. He's had some really bad games, and Oakland has been hitting the ball pretty well. I don't think he's as much of a lock as he would be if this game was at home either. But overall, I still think he's a solid option on this particular slate. You just have to, he's got a little bit of risk associated. If I look at Aaron Nola, on the surface he looks like a good option, but he is playing against the Atlanta Braves, which makes him not have a good option, not great option here. Now, where did he go? Hang on, I'm trying to. Is he not? Did they take him out of the potential? I don't see him. Billy. Oh, there he is. I'm sorry about that. I couldn't see him. So he's been okay against Atlanta in 4 games. He's had 22 fantasy points a game. But I don't love using guys against Atlanta. And he's had a couple bad games against Atlanta too. He had one really big one and then a couple average and a bad one. Alex Manoah is another guy I'm going to mention here. If I could find people, holy crap. Manoah. Sorry, I don't know why I can't see these. But anyhow, he's playing against Tampa Bay, who actually hit the ball extremely well yesterday. But he is in the line to get 15 to 20 fantasy points. But his upside's a little bit capped because of his strikeouts and stuff. I don't love him in this particular matchup, but I think he's a decent option. And then finally, I'm going to mention Bradley Singer. Singer has been... Brady. I don't know why I said Bradley. He's actually been pretty good lately, and he has some high upside because he tends to get the win and doesn't give up a lot of earned runs. And so I think he doesn't seem like a great pitcher, but I think he has upside in this particular situation. He is capped, though, because of his strikeouts. But overall, I think he's in a good spot. He's actually, he seems a little weird, but I think he has a chance to get 20 fantasy points today. If you need to save as a secondary pitcher, he's somebody you could potentially do that with. So the last guy I'm going to talk about is Giolito. I forgot about him. for Chicago White Sox against Detroit. Now, he's averaged 17.7 fantasy points a game. He would be a somewhat decent option. The only catch with him is he's a little bit safer on FanDuel than DraftKings because the earned runs don't hurt you as much on FanDuel, and he probably will give up one or two. With that said, let's get into the batters that I like. So we'll start at catcher here. Now, there's not a whole lot of value here, but there's some, and they come in the form of the two players that are playing in the San Diego game. Austin Nola is going to be one. Now, obviously he hasn't been particularly great, but he's averaging 7.6 against Colorado, and he has some real upside in this particular matchup. Not a big home run threat normally, but in this particular game he will be. The other guy and other potential catcher for this particular game is Elias Diaz, and he obviously plays a lot better at home than on the road. He's not a superstar by any stretch of the imagination, though, so I don't love him in this matchup, but he's still better than a lot of the other options available. So you could also just look at Contreras or Travis d'Arnaud, whichever one of them pitches in the game for Atlanta, or sorry, catches for the game in Atlanta. But neither one of them are particularly super great options simply because of they're facing Nola today. But I do like the guys in Kansas City. Melendez has been absolutely killing the ball. 9.1 fantasy points a game last 10. And if you want to be a little more contrarian, and you have the money, and you're not going to pay down for San Diego's catcher, you could choose Salvador Perez, who's averaging 8.2 last 10 as well. Both Kansas City catchers are in pretty good spaces right now in this particular game. At first base, my first look is going to be Albert Pujols, who's actually been hitting the ball pretty well, though he doesn't score a ton of fantasy points unless he hits a home run. But he is cheap enough that if you need to save money at some position, he's a great secondary option to help you save money at a position that there's not a ton of value at necessarily, but you know it's probably not a position you're going to pay up for today, unless you take Brandon Drury. The next two options are going to be Josh Bell and Brandon Drury. Now, Josh Bell has been absolutely abysmal lately. He's only being mentioned because he's playing in Colorado, but his price here is also $3,800. Is not ideal. Meanwhile, Brandon Drury's price is also really high, but he is at least serviceable, and he's got some real upside in this particular game, averaging 7.7 last 10, and he's been really good against Colorado this season, averaging 10 fantasy points a game. Then I'm going to mention Nathaniel Lowe for Texas. I really like Texas in this matchup. I think they're kind of sneaky on the slate, and his price point is more manageable than some of the others, and he's 7 fantasy points a game for last 10. And then we'll look at C.J. Cron, who may or may not play, but I want to mention him anyway because he's been day-to-day. This is a really nice plus matchup for him. He's averaging almost 9 fantasy points a game. Obviously, his price is maxed out, but he's really good at home. And then finally, for this position, Jose Abreu for the White Sox. I really like the White Sox today to have a really good game. He's been hitting the ball extremely well as of late, and he's been really good against Detroit this season as well. So I think we have a lot of good options at first base, and it really just depends on what kind of money you want to spend. At second base, we have Jake Cronenworth. He's in a really good spot here for San Diego, even though he hasn't been as good lately. This is a plus matchup for him on the road in Colorado, which he has also just killed this season with 4 home runs in 16 games and 12 fantasy points a game. I think he's a great option, and he's not as expensive as some of the other guys from San Diego. Then I'm going to mention Tony Kemp, because he's a left-handed hitter and he's going up against a guy that's not very good against lefties. He has been surprising. Sorry about that, my microphone died. But Tony Kemp has been surprisingly good lately, averaging 13 fantasy points a game. So I think he's a solid option here, even though it's a risky situation with the starting pitcher. Dario Estrada is a guy I really like, and unfortunately his price is pretty high. But overall, he's been hitting the ball extremely well, and he's in a nice plus matchup against Arizona at Arizona, in fact, with the warm weather that's going to make the balls fly. Then we're going to look at Gabby Torres for New York Yankees. They're going up against Hill for Boston, who's not a very good pitcher, and he's been absolutely crushing the ball, almost averaging 15 fantasy points a game. He doesn't always get over 10, but he does more than he hasn't lately. Then we're going to look at Marcus Semien for Texas. Again, I like Texas today, but Semien's price is pretty high. But he has been extremely good against Cleveland this season so far, and he's averaging 12.4 fantasy points for the last 10 games. Going on to third base, one of our super value options is Josh Jung, but he hasn't been hitting the ball quite as well as of lately, so he's kind of downgraded to a Hail Mary option. But if you're desperate to save money and you have room at third base, he would be the person to do it with. And then Montero for the Colorado Rockies is in a great spot. He's been hitting the ball extremely well lately, though his fantasy points don't necessarily show that. But he's really good at home, averaging almost 8 fantasy points a game. And he's got a really plus matchup here where he has potential to hit a home run. Then we're going to look at Manny Machado. He, for San Diego, I mean, what's not to love about this particular situation? Manny Machado in Colorado. He's been hitting the ball extremely well the last few games. He's finally got out of his slump, and so this is a great situation for him. Nolan Arenado has been hitting the ball extremely well as of late as well. He's averaging 7.1 fantasy points a game. He kind of had a couple bad games in a row, but overall he's still a really solid matchup in a plus situation. Jose Ramirez is probably too expensive to roster, but he's in a great matchup against Texas, and he's been averaging 10 fantasy points a game. And then Josh Donaldson is a guy I've liked a lot the last week or so, and he's done really well. He's going up against Hill for Boston as well. He's averaging 10 fantasy points a game at hitting .317 with several home runs. I think he's in a really good spot here. And then Yoan Moncada for the Chicago White Sox. I think he's a really solid play here, and everybody on this White Sox team is looking he's going to be happy to be facing a pitcher that's not nearly as good as the last few that they faced in Cleveland, and they should be able to take advantage of that pretty easily. For a shortstop, we have a few good options here, not as many as some of the other positions, but Kim for San Diego is in a good spot. Even though he's not typically all that great, he's in a nice plus matchup here in Colorado. Then we're going to look at Trey Turner, who has been hitting the ball pretty well as of late, but he's not scoring as many fantasy points as you want. But it's just a matter of him getting the home run again, which he's kind of due for, and this is a great situation for him to potentially do it in. Then I have Tommy Edman, who's a little bit overpriced here on DraftKings. He's underpriced on FanDuel, but he's averaging almost 7 fantasy points a game, and he is a little bit due for a good game, and I think this is a situation where he could do that. The two guys I probably like the most about this position are Jeremy Pena being one of them. He's averaging almost 10 fantasy points a game, and he's really starting to get going. He went through a little bit of a stretch where he was kind of not very good, but he's starting to get out of that now. And then finally, at this position, Elvis Andrus. I really like how he's played lately. He's averaging 10 fantasy points a game, super solid as of late, and even though he had 2 off games, they were against really tough pitching. Before that, he'd just been rocking hardcore for a while, and I expect him to pick back up where he left off with this nice plus matchup at pitcher. Then in the outfielders, we have Austin Slater for San Francisco. Again, I like San Francisco today because of the situation that they have in Arizona, facing bad pitching and stuff. And he's in a good situation here, and he's relatively inexpensive. Jurgensen Profar, he's almost too expensive for what he's been doing lately. He's only averaging 4.6 fantasy points a game. But if there's any place where you can get out of a slump, it's Colorado. Then we have Juan Soto, who, I mean, I would almost pay for Soto just as much as I'd pay for Judge, just simply because he has potential in this particular situation. He's averaging 11.3 against Colorado this season as well, and half of those games were not even in Colorado. If we look at Jonathan Daza, he's been playing pretty well as of late in Colorado. His points per game in Colorado are improved over the away games, and this is a nice plus matchup for him. Then we're going to look at sorry about that. Grichuk, I'm not sure how you say his name exactly, for Colorado as well. He's in a nice situation where he's been hitting the ball. He's averaging 8.1 at home. I think he's a really good situation for him to potentially hit a home run. And he's been good against San Diego this season. Connor Joe's another guy I think is in a great spot here for Colorado as well. He is averaging about 7 fantasy points a game at home. And though he's not really a home run threat, he's been hitting the ball pretty good as of late. And then we're going to look at A.J. Pollock for the White Sox, who's in a great situation here. And I think he's going to start getting out of his slump. Even though he's had a couple really big games lately, he's had some zeros as well. So with that said, I think we have a really good slate here. I think the scoring will be a lot higher than it was yesterday. It seemed like yesterday's scoring was way low. But this is a great situation for most of these guys. So with that said, thank you guys again for liking, commenting, and subscribing. And have a nice day.